Hi, I'm Peter Roper. It's another serving of Potluck Politics. What's up with Washington? And we're really fortunate today to have our Congressman, Joe Courtney, from the 2nd District in Connecticut. And he's been here before, but a long time ago. But thanks for joining us, Joe. And
good to be back.
It's good to see you in person.
Thanks for the
we keep track of you.
Yep.
And I hope we're going to have your email address so people can get in touch with you and get on your newsletter. Because your email is very helpful. I read it all the time, so people should be tuned into that. So
happy to
try to
share
get you some publicity on that.
Yep, sure.
We go back a ways.
Yep.
And we don't really have a bio for you, but if there's anything you wanted to explain about how you got here, I was curious about how you originally decided to run for Congress, because you were in the legislature initially.
Yeah.
I remember that.
So yeah, I did 8 years and left in 1994, and it was actually a very positive experience in terms of chaired the Public Health Committee, was very involved with issues of healthcare access, prescription drug
And you carried
costs.
that over.
I did.
Thank goodness.
So, yes, and
I remember that.
It's a never-ending issue. I always say our children and grandchildren will be debating healthcare. That's just the nature of it's such a dynamic.
And the older we get, the more important it becomes.
No, that's true. So anyway, I mean, that was certainly back then, again, an emerging issue in terms of universal coverage, issues of prescription drug costs, and getting the chance to serve in Washington, and really just in 2022 when we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which included the prescription drug reforms that were there.
Yeah, it's huge.
I mean, it was massive, and when the bill passed and they had the price negotiation authority for the federal government to start negotiating lower prices, ARP had their monthly newsletter which said it took 60 years,
right?
Because that's how long they've been pushing for it. And the cap on insulin, vaccines are free for people on Medicare. We want to extend those provisions to working age Americans as well. There's no reason why someone who's in a employer-sponsored plan or their own small business plan are paying higher than $35 a month for insulin. So there's a lot of work to do, but you do feel like with all the frustration and nonsense that getting measures like that actually in law is really makes it worth it.
Yeah, you don't realize how important it is till you really need it. And,
right.
And it's only civilized to have health care for people. Right. But I thank you for doing that. And the Affordable Care Act was huge. I assume that's one of your prime accomplishments.
We just celebrated
brutal,
the 20th anniversary.
Right.
I was, again, actually coming over here, I was thinking about that because the uninsured rate in 2014, when it really kicked in, it was about 16%. In this country, it's down to 7%. Should be lower, but as you know, we have a lot of states which have still refused to exercise the Medicaid option. 10 states that have, in my opinion, just really misrepresented their people.
Right.
If that were to happen, that if they would actually take the advantage of that opportunity, the uninsured rate would be 5%, which is what it is in Connecticut. So. There's still people, because there's no mandate, who just don't want to, take advantage of it or avail themselves of it. But, again, that issue is still in play. Donald Trump has already declared a number of times that he wants to repeal.
They still want to kill it, and it's
the
mind-boggling that that's an issue that they want to run on.
And the Republican Study Conference, which is about 180 members of the House Republican Conference.
Are they going after healthcare too?
Absolutely, and they want to tax health benefits for employer-sponsored health plans.
And Social Security, Medicare.
And the Social Security raise the retirement age, cut Social Security, voucherize Medicare, which would basically turn it into, a plan you'd have to enroll every year, which
Right.
seniors don't need that drama necessarily. And again, you would have a limited premium voucher to go out and buy it. So it's basically just to degrade people's health insurance, which is not where America should be headed.
No. But thank you again for what you're doing in healthcare, because that's a huge issue.
And it's right on the ballot in November.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, we're not going to go into that, but women's health care is
Right.
really at stake in this election, and I hope they're going to save us again.
Right. Again, the Democrats in the House, when we controlled it, passed the Women's Reproductive Health Act, which would basically, restore Roe v. Wade protections that were there. And the Dobbs case, which the guy who's running against me celebrated when the court decision was handed down, a couple of years ago, has just opened the door to these really anti-women laws. They're and you get these horror stories of people who are being forced into full-term pregnancies when their health conditions are really being put at serious risk.
Yep, it's bizarre that we have half of our government that wants to not govern.
Right.
I know government has problems, but basically they're making it worse. It's pretty chaotic. Those of us watching Washington, it's pretty chaotic, and you're in the thick of it. How do you feel about working in this situation? I know you're running again, so that's good. Thank you for hanging in there. But it's got to be really frustrating.
No, someone described it as an abusive workplace, which is because, the Congressman from Wisconsin, Mike Gallagher, who announced he's resigning from Congress, he, is somebody who I think if he was sitting here, you would really enjoy meeting and listening to him. He's 39 years old, he served over in the Middle East, Marine Corps, but he Ivy League educated, real thinker, really serious guy. He's right of center, no question about that, but he's somebody who doesn't demonize people who disagree with him. And when he voted against the Mayorkas impeachment, based on his own review of the law
of his career,
and the facts, they just went after him, and I think he'll be back. He's young enough where hopefully, if the world changes, he's somebody who could serve again. But again, he's a perfect example of a really good member who, because of just the way within his own caucus, people get just, as I said, demonized. That it's just it's
well, we
time to do something
basically
else.
have turned into a minority rule country. The minority has all the power at this point, and they're abusing it. And it's pretty sad because it means very little gets done, and
well, again, the last Congress,
good people are bailing.
the last Congress where we had a very slender majority, but
Right.
the Inflation
So
Reduction
much got
Act,
done.
which is all the climate change provisions that are in there, the infrastructure bill, the PACT Act for veterans, which is helping all the vets with toxic exposure illnesses. All that got done in the 117th Congress, which looking back on it was extremely productive.
I know. I really give Biden and Nancy Pelosi and all of you on the Democratic side a lot of credit, because the Republicans basically didn't want to help at all
McCarthy
until they're handing out checks, and then they want to show up.
McCarthy and Mike Johnson voted against the PACT Act. They whipped a no vote on the infrastructure bill. Not one of them voted for the rescue plan or the Inflation Reduction Act, which, as you point out, they're happy now to go to the ribbon
Yeah, they're
cuttings.
trying to act like it's their idea.
Yeah. Vote no and take the dough.
Yeah. So what do you think needs to be done now? Is there something that can be done to change the rules? Obviously not unless the Democrats get control, because the Republicans don't want to change anything that's for the better.
So, again, looking back to January of last year when Kevin McCarthy was desperately trying to get votes to become elected speaker, again, he empowered, these tiny groups of individuals in his own caucus.
The crazies, I'll say it.
With the motions.
You don't have to, I'll say it.
With the motions to vacate, which basically only one member can bring, which is, clearly it just creates an instability in the institution that, there should be the right to make a motion to vacate, but you should have at least a decent number of individuals before that's brought. we've also seen how the Rules Committee, which controls the flow of business to the floor, when you have a group of zealots, on the Rules Committee, basically.
McCarthy put a lot of
he did
a lot of people on
who
rules
just have no interest
who had no interest in rules.
Right. So if you look at the productivity of the Congress, at the end of last calendar year, it was 31 bills passed. I mean, you have to go back before the Depression to see such a low rate production Congress. And as you know, we finally passed the budget for 2024. It was 5.5 months into the fiscal year. I mean, that is so disruptive in terms of critical programs that people need help with when you have that uncertainty about whether or not an agency is actually going to.
It actually costs money in the long run.
That's right.
Screw around with that.
So, I mean, you can just sort of go on and on in terms of just how, the chaos really, I think, really put this country at risk. The economy, is strong enough that I think it's still growing at this point, but every shutdown sort of threat that comes up, you can sort of see, the markets start to contract. The threat to default, back in May of last year on the full faith and credit of our country, by not extending the debt limit. We did it 19 times as a country under Ronald Reagan, 3 times under Trump. I mean, again, it's really basically saying you're giving the Treasury the authority to pay our bills. That's there. But, when obviously a Democrat comes into office like Obama or Biden, suddenly it becomes a crisis. And, we dodged the bullet, but you talk to the rating agencies, and the paper of our country has actually been downgraded because of the fact that they don't have confidence in the political.
Well, our allies are questioning what's going to happen and what we're doing, and you can't really blame them. And actually, a more serious issue than that even is defending democracy, and especially in relation to Ukraine, and that's a huge issue for us. Terri and I have been standing in Mystic almost every Saturday for 2 years, supporting Ukraine.
Good for you.
With flags and giving out little flags. And it's been really nice to meet Ukrainians. There are a lot of Ukrainians in Connecticut, and they come to Mystic and they see the flags and they're so excited. They think we're Ukrainian, but they seem like great people, and obviously they are defending democracy. And if we don't help them, we're going to be over there fighting to defend democracy in Poland or
Estonia,
Moldova or Estonia or somewhere else, because Putin isn't going to stop if he's not stopped now. So I can't understand why that becomes a political issue, but it has. And do you think there's any way to get the speaker to?
So, first of all, just one point, your comment about the fact that there are Ukrainian Americans in our state and in our region.
You've met with some of them.
We have, and there's actually a Ukrainian Catholic church up in Willimantic, St. Mary's, which my wife and I have gone to mass there every now and then, and wonderful people, very hardworking, devout, and they have coffee and donuts after church, and obviously they're following events like the folks you described, like just like a box score in terms of trying to figure out what's going to happen. So, again, when the invasion first happened in February 2022, there was actually very strong support. It was only a tiny fraction of the Freedom Caucus that opposed it. Over time, the no votes have, gotten larger and larger. The last sort of real test vote we did was during the Defense Authorization Act, and 117 House Republicans voted to strip the Ukraine security assistance funding that was in there. So, fast forward to where we are today. The Senate passed the supplemental bill, which included money for Ukraine 70 to 28 back in February, which is, for the Senate, that's actually a pretty impressive number that was there. So, when it came out of the Senate, Speaker Johnson could have brought it to the floor immediately on the suspension calendar, and it would have passed. So, but he's got that motion to vacate hanging over his head right now that Marjorie Taylor Greene filed. So in the meantime, a discharge petition has been filed in the House, which is a way to force a vote. We're up to 191 members have signed on to it. There's some folks in our caucus who have some hesitation about it. It's not necessarily about Ukraine. It's about some of the funding for Israel, which is you know, I mean, the fact that it cleared the Senate, I think, in such a strong fashion, I think, you know, there's other ways to express their concerns than blocking, you know, the supplemental that's there. And then there's Republicans who, you know, will vote for it, but they're very concerned about going against the speaker. You know, they want to give him the authority to bring it to the floor. But this thing, external events, like you said, are going to force a vote because Putin is massing his troops on the front lines. Right. And Poland,
I mean, they will own the massacre if they don't step up.
And it's really going to, and I think that, you know, that hopefully is going to get public opinion much stronger out there to get this bill passed. Yeah. They need help.
I actually heard today that the Speaker said that he would support it if he could get, I don't know, liquefied natural gas facility in his district. It's like, okay, he can be bought, I guess.
Yeah, and
Pretty
the problem
sad.
is that if you amend the bill that came out of the Senate, then it's got to go back to the Senate,
right.
and we don't have time for that right now. I mean, you know, maybe, you know, if he'll ask the president to consider supporting a you know, project like that, you know, he should get maybe a fair chance to but
there's always possibility for compromise
exactly.
on the Democratic side, but the Republican side, you never know.
But in the meantime, these, you know, folks who are fighting really our fight and Europe's fight, they need help.
Yeah. I want to give you a chance to blow your horn a little bit about the economy in Southeast Connecticut and Connecticut with submarines. I'm not a big proponent of submarines, as you probably remember.
Yes.
But I have to thank you for the economy that it's created. One consequence, though, is a lot of housing is being proposed and pushed, and you know, we've already had a lot of housing in this area, and I'm concerned that this is not going to go forever, and we're going to have a lot of housing that's not being used. So, any thoughts about that? And
so, well, first of all, again, if you look at the job market right now in Connecticut, the Norwich, New London job market is the fastest growing in the state, and it's that always has not been the case, as you know. This region has lagged a lot of times in the past, and I think
the state in general has kind of lagged other parts of the country.
Well, it's
previously.
This area, this labor market is number 2 in New England as well. So I mean, it really, what's happening here is actually, you know, definitely almost unprecedented. 5,300 hires last year. About a third of that was in Rhode Island, 2/3 here in Connecticut. So, you know, the job training programs, the trade schools, even the comprehensive high schools are really keeping up, I think, in terms of trying to provide people that have at least semi-skills so he can go in and get hired there. Housing is a big concern. You know, if you talk to the leadership at EB, they will describe individuals that they've recruited from other parts of the country. They get here, they see what Connecticut housing prices are like, and after searching around for a while, they get in their car and they leave. So that's happening. You know, I think there's been some really you know, interesting development that is starting to, you know, happen in the area there. I know in Stonington, there's a project that was at the former movie theater complex, which is going to be, you know, which really, because of COVID, had really suffered there, and they're moving forward with some, I think, you know, really nice mixed income units that are there. It's not just EB, though, that is really driving the housing market. I mean, I just think, you know, in the wake of COVID, you know, the shoreline in Connecticut just became a lot more attractive to people, and so
in our neighborhood, a lot of people have moved up from New York, at least for the weekend.
So,
you know, they buy a house and use it on the weekend, which again is impacting the housing market significantly, I think.
So I personally believe, you know, we need more capacity. I mean, I just think that, you know, really the housing market, which suffered during the downturn in 2009, the financial collapse, I don't think it really ever really recovered. And that's really one of the reasons why I think there still is a gap. And it's not just in Connecticut. It's really, you know, you talk to my colleagues from other parts of the country. I mean, out west in California, I mean, the housing shortage and the prices, you know, are really frightening.
I guess we're running out of time already, but you seem to have a MAGA Republican running against you again. He seems out of touch with the majority in Connecticut in this district. Do you think there's any chance he could represent this district fairly?
So, I mean, we know he served in this General Assembly, and we got sort of an opportunity to sort of, you know, see how he performed. You know, perfectly civil person. And but I think if you look at his voting record, I mean, he really didn't even support a lot of measures that his other colleagues in the Republican caucus, supported, and were kind of very consensus type issues that are there. So, in my opinion, we need people who are really interested in trying to find ways to get results, and
Right.
you have to. The structure of our legislative process, really almost requires some compromise, in terms of people working together.
It's always worked.
And, and Mike, I
Even
think,
Ronald Reagan could compromise, and he
right?
did.
No, that's right. So, that's really what I think people really are looking for, based on my travels around. They are very concerned about how dysfunctional, since the Republicans took over, Congress has been over the last year and a half. So, and I think it's going to be a very strong message in the fall. I mean, aside from all the other issues about healthcare and reproductive freedom and education,
Infrastructure,
and infrastructure.
and
I mean,
on.
you go on and on, but it really is just getting some real stability, back in our system.
Yeah. A quick plug for community access television.
Yeah.
You're in the studio. The whole system is kind of changing. People aren't getting cable, and so the funding is a little bit in jeopardy here. And I'm hoping maybe there's some chance you could help us out from the federal level. I don't know if there's any discussion about that at the federal level. And we're talking with the state now too, but just keep that in mind, that we are willing to talk to you about that at some point. And if you think of any way that you could help local public access, I think it's a valuable resource, and it's a chance for goofballs like me to get out here and talk to people like you. That doesn't happen on regular TV.
The demise
of
local media, I mean, actually, I think is another one of these real underlying questions about our democracy, because you need to have a healthy, mixture of media out there that, covers local events and politics. And so, happy to help. And I know you have other shows on this station, like our friend Joe Delacruz.
Yeah. There's some good stuff on local public access, and it goes to YouTube, so people can get it from anywhere now with the programming. So that's another benefit. But I just want to let you know that we may need a lifeline. Are there any issues that you want to talk about that we haven't talked about yet? I mean, there's energy, there's voting rights, there's climate, there's lots of issues out there. I know we're not going to cover them all, because we try to keep this to a half an hour.
Sure.
So you've got a busy schedule, so.
So I do think the Inflation Reduction Act has so many provisions in it that really have taken a while for people to sort of understand. So this week we had the Undersecretary of Agriculture to talk about some of the energy programs for farmers, that Renewable Energy Assistance Program, REAP, and we visited a mushroom farm in Stonington, Seacoast Mushrooms, which is installing solar panels.
Great.
Again, it's an ingenious enterprise that he has there. Shiitake mushroom, I mean, the really specialty mushrooms that are there, but they're energy intensive. I mean, that's how he went over to Japan and learned, how the ins and outs in terms of how to do that. So the Inflation Reduction Act now increased the REAP grants to farmers for installation of solar panels and other forms of renewable energy, geothermal as well. It's been around for a while, this program, but it was only 25% of the cost. Now it's 50% of the cost. There's also a tax credit for whatever you're putting out in terms of your own expenditure. So this makes it actually really affordable. So for Connecticut farmers, where energy costs, whether you're a dairy farmer or a specialty crop grower like the mushroom farms, I mean, getting the ability to access this renewable, cheap form of electricity, I think is really going to be a game changer in terms of really creating sustainable farms like Seacoast Mushroom, which is a young family that has gone out and created a market for themselves. So I mean, that's just one example of many in terms of heat pumps, efficiency measures that people can put into their homes. Again, the tax credits are really going to stimulate a lot of change to help sort of decarbonize the generation of energy.
Every little bit helps.
Yes. So the Inflation Reduction Act, between the prescription drug assistance for seniors, the energy assistance that's included in there. I mean, it's really, over time, I think people are going to really grasp how significant that measure was.
Yeah, and the infrastructure bill was really important. Again, your email newsletter,
Yep.
you're talking about a lot of projects that are happening
That's right.
here in your district. And
So the biggest
that's
one
impressive
is
and it's great.
the Connecticut River Bridge, the old Saybrook Rail Bridge that's
Yeah.
there, which is very old. It's over about 120 years old, so it needs to be replaced. But trains have to slow down when they go over it because of its age, and so getting a higher speed. I don't want to call it high speed because it's we still got a ways to go to get to those. But a higher speed requires good infrastructure.
So I'm assuming you're on side with Biden. He's done a great job. I think even better than I expected he was going to do, against many odds, thanks to people like you. Do you want to say anything about the election and,
Sure.
and how important you think it is?
So, I think his State of the Union address, surprised a lot of people. I think his
He's
supporters,
always surprising people.
His supporters were feeling very upbeat about the fact that, he was very energetic. He, engaged all the heckling that was going on in the room.
Yeah.
He seemed to actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
And then the other side, I think, was kind of shocked at the fact that they really expected him to be sort of this doddering.
They believe their own rhetoric, which is bizarre.
Well, he
because
wasn't.
They make it up as they go.
He was very much on his game that's there. And as I said earlier, you've got issues where, ex-President Trump is, again, trying to talk about repealing Obamacare, national abortion ban, the repeal of the Inflation Reduction Act. Anything that was accomplished, he's against, and we can't go backwards in terms of the healthcare measures included in there for seniors and getting the fastest rising cost of healthcare, which is prescription drugs. There's great work, and some of it's being done here locally by really talented people. But the fact that we're paying twice as much for the same medication as countries, in Europe or whatever, there's no excuse for that.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. Any advice for what people could be doing right now to save our democracy? And I know voting is top of the line, but
Sure.
Have any ideas of what people could be working on? Or
Again, I think Connecticut, because we have early voting for the first time, I think is really going to be an opportunity for people to, be creative about ways to increase voter turnout. And I think people are going to really embrace it. So that they're not getting harassed for voting on election day on one day only.
Right.
And so I know we did a little
in
bit
the
of a
long run,
test
it may
run.
help the registrars and the
Oh,
clerks
totally.
because they can spread it out.
And it helps candidates, frankly, and it helps that you're not out sort of checking the same people over and over again.
Yeah.
If they're voted, then they're you can just kind of go on to the next individual or person. So I'm very excited about that for Connecticut. Yeah, and I know, talking to some of my supporters out there, that I think they really are focused in terms of trying to get the word out there for people that you have an opportunity to fit it into your schedule, which having it only on one day can sometimes create those dilemmas for folks.
Yep. And I'm actually waiting for some postcards. I'm going to send postcards to Nevada to get at least Democrat-leaning people that don't vote regularly to get out and participate. So I've done that before, and it's pretty satisfying because you're actually doing something.
So I was listening
Connecticut, we're pretty safe at the moment, but the other states need help. So
I was at a conference recently where, so about 112 million folks voted in the 2022 election nationwide. The projection right now is about 160 million. So, there's going to be this huge sort of, group of folks that, I think are really going to, have a big impact in terms of just the way even the down ballot goes in a lot of these other states that are there. So, so I think some people are almost dreading the election because I think it's going to be so contentious and nasty, but, it's a democracy and it's not a spectator sport. People need to really get involved.
Yeah. And the fear of violence can't be allowed to work. We have to work through it. Well, I think we're getting to the end of this. Thank you, Joe. And if anytime you are going to be in the area and want to spend a half an hour, we'd be glad to do another one, because obviously we didn't cover all the issues.
No, that's right.
And, you know, your knowledge is vast on what's been going on and what's going to happen, so we'd love to have you come back.
No, it's a pleasure. Really great to see you again, and
Yeah.
Terri as well. So, yeah.
This has been Potluck Politics. I'm Peter Roper, and thank you for watching, and be well.